Well, good evening and welcome to another Your Life Matters. Glad to have you along tonight. We're going to be talking about fear and anxiety. My goodness, those are things that just trouble everybody, it seems like. So many people are hassled by fear and anxiety and almost a stranglehold that it has on people. My lovely wife is watching. Hello, sweetheart. Fear and anxiety just seem to be something that grabs us and won't turn us loose. So first of all, let's define fear and anxiety. Yes, there's a correlation, but there's also a big difference in them. Fear is obviously that distressing emotion that can keep us from doing something, especially something that we think is an impending danger or evil or pain is associated with it. Those are real threats, but there's also the imagined threat. Those threats that make you wonder, am I kind of going crazy? You know, why am I thinking of something that probably is not going to happen, but we're scared of it anyway? Those are where fears come in that are unfounded. Now, that is getting over into the area of anxiety, because anxiety is a feeling of fear, dread, or uneasiness, but it's also something that can make you feel as though you have an increased heart rate, because an anxiety is something you worry about. It's something that may not be a current danger, but something you worry about down the road. Fear is a real threat of harm, either physical, emotional, psychological, and it can be imagined as well as real. You can just imagine that you're going to have issues, and that can cause fear. Some common fears include, I have these things about spiders so much. So now I see so many people with this new spider that's come over from Asia, or maybe it's Japan. Anyway, everybody's freaking out about this particular spider. But some people don't care anything at all about spiders. Not a big deal. Some people are scared to death of snakes, and that is a well-founded thing. We have a snake around our house that I named Lucy, simply because every time I see this big black snake, if I give her a name, I don't know if it's a he or a she, but anyway, every time I give her the name Lucy, which stands for Lucifer, by the way. When I see Lucy, I always, it doesn't startle me so bad if she's got a name. So I'll see her in the yard and say, "Oh, hey, Lucy." And that kind of softens it just a little bit. But yeah, we all have that fear of snakes. Even though it may not be a poisonous snake, still, you're startled when you see them. So startledness, if that's a word, is certainly a part of fear. I have a fear of heights. So many people have that fear of heights, and I'm just paralyzed when I have to do something that's extremely high. I remember going up into the World Trade Center, and I hugged the inside wall on the 101st floor because I didn't want to get over near the windows. I mean, very safe. There's glass there. Nobody's ever fallen out of those. But, buddy, I did not like that at all. So that's one of those things you have to look at. That's one of the things we'll be talking about tonight is, has anybody ever fallen out of a situation like that? Yeah, that's an unfounded fear, because in the history of the World Trade Center, nobody had ever fallen out of one of those windows, at least not on purpose. Those are the kind of things that we do to allay those fears when they come up. We'll talk about that in just a minute. The fear of flying. So many people are scared to death to get on an airplane. I remember we had a friend of ours. We were on the way to New Orleans, and we had to go over that very tall bridge. I guess it was in Metairie on the way to New Orleans. And she got down in the floorboard, couldn't stand to be up that high on that bridge. It just scared her to death. So many things like that are just imagined. They're not real fears, they're just imagined. And we build them up so big in our mind till that's where anxiety comes in. Anxiety is a word we use for fears that are something that might go wrong in the future. Yeah, not even a real fear, but something that could go wrong. Anxiety is a reaction to emotions rather than real and true environment. So see, that's a big issue. Anxiety is a fear that we have that is brought up in our emotions. Have you ever known somebody that just worried themselves to death? My grandmother was like that. She just worried and worried and worried, and we would always talk with her about, "Grandmama, don't worry." Every time she heard a siren, she would call everybody in the family to see if maybe they had left home and maybe it was them that was involved in the accident. She would sit and twiddle her thumbs and just worry so much about everyone. Then again, she lived to be 95, so I can't say that worry killed her, but that's just an extreme part of anxiety, is having worry that bad over something. So what do we do about these things? You know, that's the issue. It's not so much defining it, it's how can we handle it? And handling may not be the right word. How do we manage it? Because we all have those. Much of it is situational. I know I went through a very, very low point in my life. Number one, when I was fired from a job that I knew I'd done very well at, and I went through a low point. Why would anybody fire me for doing a good job? I knew I'd done a good job. And come to find out later, it was just a weird situation completely. The guy that fired me actually asked where I was the next day and said he didn't mean for me to be fired, but it was already done. So much for that idea. But I was scared. I could never find another good job again. Oh my goodness, when I went through my divorce, I thought, I will never find happiness. I was scared to death to date anyone. I was scared to death to try to reach out. I knew 5 single women in our town, and none of them were desirable at all. So I wound up going to Atlanta, found Debbie. Or Debbie found me, actually, is the way it was. So anyway, it worked out well. But those are the kind of things we get scared of. We get scared of what might be, not what is. There's where the anxiety comes in. Now, we're not talking about an anxiety disorder. Obviously, there are people who have anxiety disorders. Those are mental health issues, and those are things that need to be handled by a licensed physician or a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist or somebody who has far more knowledge of those types of disorders. OCD is one of those. We'll talk about that in a little while. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Ultimate cleanliness, people who just can't seem to get things clean enough. Those are kind of anxiety things that have gone to a different level. So how do you fight your fears? One thing is take a time out. You know, just stop and calm down. Get that heart rate back normal again. If you have to, beat on your chest. Start with your 110 heart rate and slow that thing down to about 70. And help yourself to get back to a normal heart rate. Reboot. You know, we do that with our physical cell phones and our computers nowadays. When something starts to go haywire, we reboot. That's exactly what we need to do when we start to face fear and anxiety, is just stop and calm ourselves down. We may even need to go through the actual directions of where we are, the actual symptoms, the actual situation we're in. You can distract yourself by doing something else. Don't distract yourself by eating. That's a whole nother story, and something we'll delve into a little later is the health situation. But don't distract yourself by eating. That's kind of the worst thing you can do, and so many people do that. They use food as we celebrate with food. We're down in the dumps with food. We even call it comfort food. We distract ourselves with food. With a baby, whenever a baby starts to cry, well, give him something to eat. He'll quit crying. He'll calm down. We have just been led down the wrong road when it comes to nutrition. That's for another show and another time to talk about. How about distract yourself from worrying for about 15 minutes? Walk around the block. Make yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. Take a bath. Do something to distract yourself and get yourself out of that mindset. That's one of the best things you can do. We talked about getting that heartbeat down. Breathe through the panic. Just take a moment and take a quick breath. Get rid of the sweaty palms and the faster heartbeat. But try not to fight the thing that you're scared of. Just allow it to calm down and go away. Stay where you are and simply feel the panic without having to distract yourself. You can do that. You know, we can train ourselves how to deal with fear and anxiety. Breathe slowly and deeply, as I was saying. Just force yourself to slow down a bit. The goal is to help your mind catch up and cope with the panic. You know, again, just like eating is not a food thing. Eating is a brain thing. Overeating is a brain thing. Same thing with panic. It is not so much the real presence of danger. It is sometimes, but not so much as it is what we've thought about in our brain. So give your brain a chance to catch up and understand that it is not a fear, not an anxiety-ridden thing. Again, we're talking about facing your fears. Avoid your fears only makes them worse. You know, Mark Twain had a statement. He said, "Eat the frog." And what the whole gist of that, I know that sounds weird, but what the whole gist of that is, he says, first thing in the morning, eat the frog. And then everything else all day long will be better and easier. So face those fears early. You know, I used to be one who procrastinated doing phone calls. I procrastinated doing any kind of work early in the morning. Now, I get up an hour earlier most days, and I make sure that I handle those things first thing out every morning. So face your fears, and avoiding them only makes things scarier. My goodness, I have avoided so many things throughout my life. Passive aggressive is one of those things. I would let things go and go and go until all of a sudden I just had to do something that was beyond what the punishment or what the situation should require. And that's a terrible thing when you let it get to that point. You know, get back up on the horse when you fall off. Just make yourself do it once again. Here's another thing. Imagine what the worst is that could happen. You know, I've often thought this. What if I just fall flat on my face? How bad can it possibly be? And you know what I found out? I've had some bad things happen to me over the years. I've mentioned a few of them. I've had bankruptcy. I've had divorce. I've had firing from jobs. I've had altercations with people. Gone to court numerous times. And by the way, I will say I've always won when I went to court. That's a good thing. But I feel as though I have to look at what's the worst that could possibly happen if all this falls apart. Well, you know what? It's really not that bad. You can panic and you can have a heart attack if you get so distraught about things. So don't do it. When you imagine the worst, you begin to realize it's just really not all that bad if the absolute worst possible that can happen. Now, look at the evidence. This is what I was talking about before. Has this happened to somebody else? I talked about the World Trade Center. Have you ever known anybody that fell out of the World Trade Center? Well, no. So then why do I think that would be something that would happen to me? We often have to look at what the history is behind something. We get so caught up in our little petty fears that we think this must have happened to someone else. But if we really look at it, maybe it didn't. Maybe that is not an issue. So here's another thing. What would you say to a friend who is facing those same situation, that same problem? What would you say to them? You know what you'd say most of the time? Oh, that's not going to happen. Just go out and do it anyway. Well, why can't we say that to ourselves? It's very important to do that. And here's number 6. Try not to be perfect. Oh, my goodness. How many of us fall into this trap? You know, when people say they're a perfectionist, they can't get something done because they're a perfectionist. You know what that is? That's just absolutely putting things off. That's just a procrastinator. That's another word for procrastination, is I'm a perfectionist, so I can't do it because I don't think it'll be done perfectly. Well, that's just procrastination. No, we're not going to do it perfect. No, you probably will never do it perfectly, but do it good enough that you can accept it. That's the thing. We have bad days and we have setbacks. That is normal for anyone. It'll always happen. And remember, life is messy. Life is not easy always. We have bad days. Yes, we have good days too. And for those good days, what I do is I journal every day. I start out with my blessings every day. And my first entry in my journal every night is, God, I thank you for. And I start listing the things that I have blessings for and that I'm thankful for. Because without Him, nothing good is going to happen in our lives. So I ask Him about those things and I thank Him for those things. So visualize. Another thing is to visualize a happy, safe place. Maybe you want to visualize, man, I want to be out on the beach, or I want to be fishing, or I want to be in the woods hunting, or whatever your favorite task or your favorite place is. Visualize yourself in that place, and that takes the fear and the anxiety away. Some people like to snuggle up in bed. They like to be able to have a happy memory from their childhood. How many of you do that? You go back and think, man, what was it like to be with Grandmama and Granddaddy, sitting on the side of Doyle Street, Main Street, downtown, eating a John Soesby's hot dog in the '57 Chevy. That's one of my happy places to go to. I'm sure most of you don't have a happy place that has anything to do with a '57 Chevy, but I certainly did. Let those positive feelings soothe you into feeling more relaxed. You know, we can talk ourselves into a panic, or we can talk ourselves into a very quiet place of solitude. That's what we ought to do. Talking about it to others always helps. You know, there's strength in numbers. The Bible says where 2 or 3 are gathered, that the presence of the Lord will be in that place. And sometimes it takes a couple of people to get together and ask God to help you through things. That is extremely important to be able to do. Share your fears. Share your fears with each other. It takes away a lot of the scariness to do that. A friend, a spouse, a family member, maybe an accountability partner if you have one of those. And then sometimes it's best to go back to basics. You know, so many people turn to artificial stimuli. They turn to alcohol or drugs, or they try to self-treat their anxiety, and that just makes things worse. So simple things can help, like a good night's sleep, a healthy meal, not one of those comfort foods where you're drowning yourself in mac and cheese or a big old fat hamburger from a place that is all fat and no protein. But anyway, that's another story. A healthy meal, a relaxing walk. Those things help you reboot and help you get to a good spot. Now, let's talk about rewarding yourself. How do you reward yourself for overcoming a fear? I think this is important. It's very important that you reward yourself with something. I reward myself, got a music room, and I reward myself for a job well done with an hour of piano or drums or guitar or something in the music room. That's my reward. I've learned to reward myself in that way rather than other ways, like eating a candy bar or a piece of cake or some of those unhealthy things. I now go to something that's positive and go to something that is a reward for me. It takes time to do that, and I reward myself with that time. Reward yourself with a vacation. Debbie and I are rewarding ourselves with an anniversary trip here in a few weeks. We're going to go spend some time at a little place up in the Waynesville-Maggie Valley area. We're going to enjoy it and have fun. Can't wait to go. We're rewarding ourselves for a job well done over the summer. It has been a difficult summer for us, and medically as well as financially and other things, and we're rewarding ourselves for doing a good job of coming out of it. How about a massage? How about a healthy snack? Go to a movie, a hobby or something. Reward yourself with going fishing. Reward yourself with anything that is a hobby that you can give yourself a reward, and make sure you realize that I'm doing this because I've overcome a fear. How about a new kitchen gadget? That's something that I like. Every time we go on a trip, I buy some kind of new kitchen gadget at a kitchen store. So this gives me an opportunity to remind you that we do the Healthy Happy Hour every Tuesday afternoon. I think this weekend, because of one of Debbie's medical appointments, it's going to have to be Wednesday. But we will have a Healthy Happy Hour this week, and I'll notify everybody when that's going to be. Now, let's talk a little bit about anxiety and some of the things that come up with anxiety. Oh my goodness, you feel nervous, you feel restless, you feel tense, you have an impending sense of danger is just crushing you. That's anxiety. It's more than just fear. It has some of the same effects like rapid heartbeat, sweating, trembling, feeling weak or tired. Some people have it so much that they can't even concentrate on what they're doing. They have trouble sleeping. They even experience gastrointestinal problems because of anxiety. Controlling worry, I mentioned worry earlier. That is such a difficult thing to do. So here's some things about anxiety that you might not recognize. You feel scared for no reason. You know, so many of us feel scared, and we stop and we think, now, exactly why am I scared? Anxiety is the body's reaction to some kind of stressor. And you know, whenever you have anxiety, it releases a hormone, and that hormone, of course, we've all heard of adrenaline. Adrenaline is the hormone that is secreted whenever you feel anxiety. And it can cause classic symptoms like racing heart, sweaty palms, nausea. All of those things come from us secreting adrenaline, which then causes our brain just to have all kinds of impending doom feelings about us. So, feeling of immense fear as if it's anxiety can just come out of nowhere if we don't watch it. So, we have to kind of look at where this is coming from and why. The subconscious mind can react to anxiety before you even are aware of danger. Did you know that? Yeah, the subconscious mind is really at work 24/7. And it is so much aware of things. We have to watch those feelings sometimes. If you feel like you've been stressed at work or stressed at school, these can all cause symptoms of anxiety, even if there's no real threat to you. How many times have you worried to death about it? I shouldn't say to death. You have worried so much about a test at school or a test you had to take. And we all have been there and we've all struggled with it. But you know what it makes you do? It just makes you study harder. So many people are stressed about time. And that is usually from someone who runs late and doesn't prepare well enough. You know, prior preparation will prevent a lot of this stuff from going on. If you're a person who's always punctual and something happens and slows you down to get there, so what? I wouldn't have the wife I have today if I hadn't gone into church late one Sunday. Debbie wouldn't have spotted me and wanted to come have coffee with me after church was over. So sometimes good things come from things that we don't like. And I'm a punctual person. I did not like going into church late in Atlanta that day. But that's what happened, and something good came of it. So again, look at that worst thing that can happen. Well, in this case, it was the best thing that can happen. If you're responsible for someone being late, then set your clock earlier and do better the next time. If it's causing you significant distress in your life, that could be a sign of social anxiety. Maybe you have trouble interacting with others in social situations. Now, that fear usually works out of someone who feels that though they would be embarrassed or ridiculed by other people. This is a strong anxiety that so many people have. I know that there are people who say, I've got to be with somebody this week. What in the world will we talk about? I've never had that problem, so I don't know how to answer that. Talking to someone else has never been an issue for me, but for so many it is. In some cases, this causes people to overcompensate. They will just go out of their way to almost be too friendly or too ambitious in a conversation because they feel like they've got to make the first move and they feel like that they've got to prove that they aren't socially inept when they feel like maybe they are. Maybe they aren't at all. They just feel that way because of the anxiety that's kicking in. Again, this is a feeling, and we have to work through those feelings. Feelings are not always truthful. Feelings and facts are two different things, and we have to make sure that those feelings that we are feeling are truly backed by fact. Some people overcompensate in order to appear inconvincing, that they have feelings of embarrassment, and it's perfectly normal to be able to arrive early and talk with people. That is perfectly normal because that's something that we do on a regular basis. Everybody does that. But whenever you are socially inept and you feel as though you can't walk up to somebody and talk, you want to be a wallflower, you know what? That's okay. Be in the background if you need to. One of our therapists told us about one of our son-in-laws one time. She said, just treat him like a piece of furniture. He doesn't want to be involved in conversation, and that's okay. I had a Boy Scout in one of my Boy Scout troops that was like that, and I worried because he never wanted to do anything but just observe. He didn't want to be involved in anything. And one of my good friends told me, he said, look, just let him be. If he's comfortable doing that, it's okay. So it's okay not to be that front man, not to be the person that's the life of the party. Sometimes it's very fake when somebody tries to pull that off. So it's okay to be you. Let me tell you that again. It's okay to be who you are. Now, other things in anxiety bring out irritability. It's not always just jitterness, but sometimes it comes off in an irritability factor. I know I have friends, and I was once married to a person who you could call her first thing in the morning, and you knew by the way she answered the phone if it was going to be a good day or a bad day because of the irritability factor. And I'm not saying that in a mean way. That's factual. you could really tell that it was going to be a good day or a bad day just by the way she said hello. And that's sad whenever you've got that kind of situation of irritability going on. There were other issues there, some mental issues that caused a problem, and that was a situation that had to be dealt with a little differently. But irritability was something that you noticed right offhand with that. Small things like minor changes to plans bring out the worst in people. They can't stand change. Oh, they just get so aggravated and irritable when the slightest thing goes wrong. We've all known people like that. You know, you got to be able to roll with the punches somewhat. Most people fail to bring up their end of the bargain. They just don't seem to want to meet you halfway. And that's so important. You can't snap at your friends and family. We've all done it on occasion, but not on a regular basis. There are times when we're caught at the worst time possible, and we say something that's wrong, or we have to go back and apologize later and say, I really didn't mean that. I had this going on and this going on, and you were kind of, the comment you made was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, that kind of thing. So irrational anger is one of those things that's a problem that we have to try to overcome. And those are the things that you don't realize are part of anxiety. You just can't get into a full-blown emotional meltdown. We've all seen people do that. And that is, nothing good comes from that ever. People think they're getting their way. They think they're making a point when they're really just making it worse. Now, people that have post-traumatic stress syndrome, that is a whole nother level there. It's a cousin of anxiety disorders, but post-traumatic stress syndrome is one of those things that is very difficult to deal with, and that needs to have some medical attention dealing with that. Obviously, when someone who's been in battle, in combat, here's a car backfire or something like that, that puts them into a whole different state. And that is something that needs a little bit of work in PTSD. They may have outbursts and increased irritability and panic attacks and all of those things, but flashbacks are a big part of that as well. Extreme cleanliness, I mentioned this in the top of the show. When you have a ritualistic aspect to cleanliness, when you want to clean constantly, that's a obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and that's OCD at one of the highest levels. Debbie and I always complain. I talk to Debbie about she's OCD, which she's really not. She just likes things put in place and in order. I laugh and joke and say I am no CD whatsoever, because I can operate in the nastiest of environments. I rarely put anything away. I have tried. I just can't seem to ever put anything back. My workshop is an absolute mess. Every tool is where I left it last time. I know I have to do better. I've got to do better. One day. Yeah, right. In case of contamination OCD, now this is another thing. People who clean obsessively and they get visibly sick. They can get incredibly sick because of this kind of OCD, and that, of course, means it's time to see a professional about that. Intrusive thoughts. You ever thought you were going crazy? Yeah, we all do. At some point in time, we think, man, I am just going crazy. What is going on with me? Maybe it was thought about crashing your vehicle, or maybe you thought about running away and never coming back. You know, there was one point in time when I thought about crashing my vehicle into a bridge abutment. I didn't really think about doing it. I thought, and I prayed to God. I said, hey, if my vehicle were to go across the interstate and hit that bridge abutment, I'm okay with it. I was ready to check out. Not to do anything to cause it, but I was prepared in case it did. I was at a low point in my life. I remember being at such a low point in my life at one point in time till I just put the covers over my head and did not want to even peek out. But those are the kind of things that it's sort of normal, not to do it on a regular basis, but once or twice in your life, you're so down that you think, I'll just run away and never come back again. What if I could start my life over? Those are normal things. Don't feel like that if you're thinking that makes you weird or abnormal. That's completely normal. Those are known as intrusive thoughts. And intrusive thoughts can actually be caused by stress and anxiety. And it's because of something that's come up in your life and you think, I can't handle this. And generally, it's something that you can handle and you're probably going to have to handle. You just want to put it off or want to try to avoid it. So a significant amount of stress for some people, these intrusive thoughts can just carry on and be a situation that have to be managed. We have to manage them. And even though they're distressing, we've got to work through them. And again, it's normal for those kind of things to be there. Increased isolation. That is another point of anxiety. Living with anxiety can make it difficult to even do the simplest everyday tasks. We all know people like this who just can't seem to pull off anything because they are just crippled with anxiety. Like going to the grocery store, they just feel like they couldn't do it. What if I run into somebody I know? What will I say to them? They just can't seem to bear to do the most mundane things. Modern services like online shopping aren't helping things here. Contactless delivery. My goodness, we're isolating ourselves even more and more. Most of these people want to do this because they struggle with interactions with social people. They don't want to be involved in social interactions at all because they think it might end catastrophically. Well, how many times has it ever ended catastrophically for you? Of the thousands of people you run into each week, how many times has it turned into a big catastrophe? Maybe once in a lifetime? So look at the odds. The odds are it's not going to do it. So you got to train your brain that this is probably not going to be an issue. However, isolation is still an issue with so many people. And even not returning text or not answering phone calls, it gets so bad that so many people don't want to do that. Your anxiety is too overwhelming, and it may be time to get help if that's the situation. Anxiety is absolutely exhausting, too. It's increased fatigue is an issue there. Your body is in a near constant state of impending doom, and it is ready to trigger your fight or flight response. You know, so many people just feel like that they're at the end of their rope and they can't do anything, and I've either got to, the next thing that happens, I'm going to take off. You know, we've all heard people say that. Again, go back to your history. How much of this has actually happened to you? And if in the odd circumstance that it did happen to you, what was the outcome? Probably not the worst that could ever be. So how do you get help for overcoming anxiety? Living with fear and anxiety can be difficult. It can be very difficult, but there are steps you can take. Here's some things you can do, and we're going to end with these things. Talk to somebody you trust. You know, find someone that you really trust and say, hey, I've got an issue. I want to be very honest with you. And honesty is always the best way. Just tell them what's going on and be honest with them. Number two, try to manage your worries. Don't let worry, like my grandmother, don't let worry get out of control. Try to keep it in check and not let those emotions. Again, we're dealing with feelings and emotions here. Try to look at it factually and say, what is the worst that can happen? What am I going to do? Where has this led me in the past? How many times has this interaction caused me problems, and what was the outcome? Look at it rationally. Look after your physical health. Nothing like being healthy. Debbie and I found that the last 3 years. Nothing like being healthy. That really goes a long way toward your outlook on life. Try those breathing exercises. When you start to feel that heart rate go up again, put your hand up there and just calm yourself down to a normal heartbeat. About 65 to 70 beats a minute is a normal heart rate. So get that heart rate down. You can help yourself do that. Keep a diary. I've told you about my journal. I don't call it a diary, my journal. Journaling has been very important to me. I journal every night, whether I feel like I have time to do it or not, because it is my way of praying to God. And I'll tell you this little snippet. I read the other day that the average pastor prays less than 3 minutes a day. He's in prayer to God. The average Christian prays less than 1 minute a day. Can you believe that statistic? So I write out my prayers every night. I feel like I'll take that 5, 6, 7 minutes with God and write my prayers out every night so that I know I have spent that time with my Savior every night. So that's the way I do it to make sure that I get that time in. So that's what I do in my journal. I write my prayers out, and I also write all those things that I have gratitude for each day. Try peer support. Try talking to people that you know, not necessarily close friends, but people that you know, and get their opinion on things. You know, I do that a lot of times, especially at racetracks and at church and places where I run into people. I'll just run something by somebody and say, hey, what do you think about this situation? And I'll run something by somebody that may not be the closest of friends, but I know they'll give me a good quality answer. That's very important for us to do. And if you're a person of faith, I encourage you to do this. Pray and ask God to help you. We have found a great small group at Ebenezer. I think we're calling them life groups now that we're a part of. And it's so good to have that community of like-minded people that we can share with and we can talk with and share our deepest things that are going on in our lives. And we know that they're praying for us and helping us. So if you've got emotional issues, if you've got anxiety issues, if you've got fears going on, try that avenue. We always seem to say, well, I've tried everything else, I'll pray about it. No. Praying about it's the first thing you should do. So I know you've got friends out there that are suffering with these issues. You may be suffering with them yourself. So pray first and then try to handle some of those other things that we talked about. Next week, Debbie and I are planning on doing a program where we're going to talk about marriage, how our marriage works, what has made it work so well for 30 years. Yeah, and next month we'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary. And both of us have been through marriages that did not work. So we're going to share some good, some things that didn't work, and we're going to tell you how to fight. That's one of the big things we learned was how to have a fight. So we're going to talk about that too. All that's coming up next week. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight to Your Life Matters. Remember, if you have a question or if you have anything you want to talk to me about, send it to yourlifemattersright@gmail.com. yourlifemattersright@gmail.com. Of course, you can send me a personal message through Messenger on Facebook as well. Have a great evening. Enjoy yourself and have a great Sunday night. Look forward to a great week next week too. See ya.